AI Realized, the podcast about everything that is new, now, and next for enterprise executives deploying AI. Hosted by myself, Christina Ellwood, and my collaborator, David Yakubovich.
Our guests will share what's driving AI adoption, use cases, and business models for the data and AI economy.
Where the future is bright.
Welcome to AI Realized, podcast for enterprise executives leading AI deployments. From addressing security, data, and operations challenges to managing the organizational and management changes, AI deployment presents the opportunity to redesign our organizations from the inside out. I'm Christina Ellwood, your host for today's episode, and we are talking today with Sean White. Sean, welcome to AI Realized.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you. And I, as the CEO of Inflection AI, I'm just bursting with questions to understand where you are and where you're going, and to learn a little bit more about the vision that you have for AI, or for Inflection AI. So let's just start by talking about augmented human experiences with AI and what that means to the enterprise.
Oh, great. Yeah, I think there's a lot in there to unpack. So let me start with a couple of things. The first is augmenting human experiences. And I think this is an important framing because some of the discourse around AI has been about replacing humans or AGI. And for the most part, I tend to think about AI as a tool. It's a fantastic tool. And it really is a way for us to augment how we do things in the same way that we originally created mechanical devices and pickup trucks to help us move more than we could as humans. But we never mistook those things as humans. I think the thing that is perhaps a little different here is that for the first time in our history, certainly in my history, instead of us having to go to the technology, learn its language, figure it out, it's coming to us. It's using language. And that's a great interface for us because that means anybody can use it. And it's a great way for us to actually think about how we augment the human experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is very well said. And of course, one of the hallmarks of Inflection AI's technology is your very personable and high IQ interface, your chat bot called Pi. So that it really fits nicely in with what you're saying, that when we're talking with Pi, we almost feel like we're talking to a human, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. And that's intentional. The idea is that we have built up, again, over hundreds of thousands of years, an ability to learn from each other, ability to interact with each other, really the first interface with things that are outside of us. And so you don't want something that just has a high IQ, super smart, knows all the things in the world. You really want a tool, a thing that you can interact with that it takes into account how we naturally interact best. And that really is through language.
Yeah, for sure. You recently joined Inflection AI as the CEO. What are a few of your key observations about the competitive advantage that Inflection AI has in the marketplace today?
Yeah. First, it is a competitive space, and I think that's a great thing. It reminds me in some ways of when the internet was first getting started up in the 90s. And it was exciting because it wasn't just a couple of people focusing on a couple of areas. It was a giant surface area of everything that was happening. And that's exactly what's happening in AI today. Even though we tend to focus on some of the things like we're doing with large language models, but really there are many different kinds of flavors of AI that are coming out to the field. For us, I think there are a couple of competitive advantages that matter. One of them is that we really deal at scales that most companies just have not come close to. We're one of the 6 or 7 signatories of the White House commitments on AI. We've done the same with the Seoul and UK agreements on AI. And then in part that's because we're one of the few companies that can actually converge 350 billion parameter model and larger. And so you'll hear lots of companies that say, "Oh, yeah, we can train our own model or we can fine tune our own model," but those tend to be smaller. And in this case, scale really matters. It really has impact. It's what made the difference between something that just felt like it was a little broken, a little gibberish, and something that really feels like it is starting to understand that language. I think another thing is that it's not just scale there, it's also scale on the inference side. That is the usage, the runtime side. And one of the advantages of having Pi that you mentioned earlier, and I hope folks get a chance to try Pi, it's really a great experience, is that it's not just a couple hundred people using it. We've had over 14 million people come through and use Pi. And so we really understand what it means to have that kind of scale, both at the consumer and the enterprise scale. And maybe that the last piece is that we just keep on building. So we've had this incredible booster rocket, and there are so many new things coming out in AI. We're a block off of the Stanford campus. It gives us a great way to actually pick up and collaborate and engage on how this is evolving, because it really is evolving fast.
Yeah, for sure. There are many LLM companies out there now. So, how do you differ from those companies? Do you differ both in your technology and in your business model, or in your philosophy, or your approach to the market? What makes you different from other LLM companies?
And, across all of those, really, I already mentioned in terms of the technology, the scale and the experience is really something that most other companies just haven't been able to achieve yet. And in some ways, this is a little bit like alchemy, which is to say, information is passed on from a small group of people, and eventually it gets out into the world and everybody understands it. But right now, early on, it's just not the case. I'd say that our business model is also a little different in that we in some ways are thinking more openly about what we do with this, so that when we talk to some of the enterprises, we're having discussions about licensing our source, so they actually have transparency, so they see what's there, or they understand where it's coming from, or even for them to be able to run this on premises so that they control and own their own intelligence, so that they don't have to just trust that some large corporation is going to always do the right thing with the data that they have. I'd also say our philosophy is a little different. That is, we are a public benefit corporation. We are really focused on how we don't just make tools here, but that we actually make solutions for folks. And so it's not just one piece of the pie, where you are doing model building or fine tuning or some pieces, but overall systems. And I think that system building, that complexity is really important, because it's a little bit like the early web days where, when we were first starting out, you would build something and that was basically a server. And so when we ping the server, you send something back. But eventually we would then start to actually make these really complex systems where you might fail over to multiple devices and servers, and you have database systems and app servers and all this other stuff. That's really happening here very quickly. And our philosophy is really about listening to our users, making those systems benefit our users. And between the technology that we have, the difference in the business model, and just our general philosophy, including the public benefit corporation aspect of it, it feels differentiated than some of the companies that are really focused on one piece of that.
Yeah, I can see that. So just to summarize that, you've got a high EQ LLM with a huge scale. You've got a philosophy that includes your public benefit corporation structure and approach. And then you've got the opportunity for companies to license or put your model behind their firewall. So which enterprises are most ideal or excited by the Inflection AI model or approach?
Yeah, I'd like to say all enterprises, but I'll break it up into a couple of different groups. For the folks who really care about owning their own intelligence, the idea of being able to, either in a virtual private cloud or on-prem, manage and control this, we see a lot of excitement there. And that, in some ways, is, for instance, some organizations are regulated, like banks and insurers and the medical and health field, but also that comes from folks who just believe that it's their own trade secrets, or it's just something they want to control. And we understand that and respect that. If they want to control their privacy, or they want to control their own data, just as we would treat a consumer, we want to treat the enterprise in that same way. But the other folks who are excited and interested in this do come for this sense that these systems shouldn't just be a declarative question or an interrogative question where you get a book report back, but it's really a dialogue, and that collaborative dialogue that we built into the system is from the user interface point of view. And when we have API users who are building things off of this, they really are pushing the edges of that and experimenting with that, where sometimes it is that they are creating their own agentic flows from it. Sometimes it is that they want something that keeps that dialogue going so you can learn more and work with somebody or help them out in some way. That those two ends of the spectrum really take advantage of the things that we've built out in the system.
Would it be fair for me to imagine that an intersection of those two would be in healthcare, where doctors and healthcare practitioners dealing with patients and other healthcare practitioners would benefit from that, from both of those aspects, the private data and the protection of that private data because of the regulatory requirements and the privacy requirements, but also the very empathetic voice and the sense of connectivity between the person asking the question and the answers that they're getting back?
Yeah, that's right, Christina. But I think that's a great sweet spot for it. It's also true that really almost any enterprise that cares about creating tools that help the folks who are working there, that don't feel like drudgery, but actually feel like they are getting ahead in the things that they are doing, let them work at a higher cognitive level, that feels just as important, because it's not just that you have the high IQ and not just that you have the high collaborative intelligence, but really it's the two of them together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You've been working for, let me start over there. I just heard an indicator. You've been working with bleeding edge technologies for a long time. How did your early work in augmented reality pave the way for your current work?
That's a great question. One of the reasons I started working in augmented reality was my belief that the systems that we used to use computation to interact with our systems and with each other and with the world wasn't just going to stop at staring at a screen or a tab in our hand or a keyboard, but really should be something that starts to let us be in the flow, that lets us look up from the things that we are doing and really be in the world, be present with each other. And with augmented reality research, and I want to distinguish that from something where you hold up a phone and you look through it and you see some cute little graphics overlaid. But really, the far future of augmented reality, where we are enhancing the things we see and all around us in the world, that kind of change in the way that we engage with technology feels like it changes our behaviors, right? That we're not all bent over looking at things. And there's a thread of that, this sort of human centered technology development design, that I think really shows up in AI, which is to say that if we can actually do some of the same things, some of the same work, or even better work, but not just be sitting in front of our computers to do that, that feels like a win for individuals. It feels like a win for society. It feels like a win, really a win for enterprise as well.
How are enterprises using embedded AI in wearable devices or augmented devices?
It is early days. I'd say there are a lot of experiments, and it's worth breaking out augmented reality, say in glasses and devices like that, and then in some ways simpler devices like just the earbuds, like the ones that you're wearing right now. With glasses, there's a lot of interesting work, and you're seeing this released on some of the main consumer devices, but it's been showing up in enterprise devices for a while, where you use AR to identify something, to know what it is. This is a bit like some of my early PhD work, where you were wearing this out in the field and you could identify plant species or the things around you. But it becomes much more interesting when there is an ongoing flow about the semantic and cultural and even process and operational meaning of these things around you. And so it doesn't just have to be AR in terms of glasses, it can just be the conversation that is in your head. And so, for instance, having something that has an ongoing Socratic dialogue where you are learning or asking as you are approaching tasks in the world around you, that actually changes the way we think about our work, keeps us in flow more. And the next step in a lot of this then is not just on these other platforms, but also in different agentic flows. So it's not just that cognitive discussion, but also getting things done, which I think we all care about. And so we're just starting to see some of that in some of the interfaces and some of the enterprises. And frankly, some of the enterprises that have been using glasses, like manufacturing and construction, things like that, are realizing that they can add quite a lot in by adding in AI together with these systems.
Yeah, breakthroughs in materials are also very important in that, aren't they? In terms of the sensors, but also in terms of the materials for forming devices that are natural for humans to wear or to interact with in their environment. So there's some breakthroughs over in that area too. What do you think are some of the ethical considerations when companies are using LLMs and augmented reality and train them on employee behavior, a kind of intelligence that we don't today have a way to measure, but we know it's there. It's not just the data, it's not just the business process, it's also people's behavior. What do you think are the ethical considerations related to that?
Yeah, I'll go back a little bit to the way we tended to think about it at Mozilla, which I think is important, which is at the simplest level, no surprises, right? Which is you don't want to suddenly find out that something has happened that you didn't expect in terms of your data, your life, your experiences, any of these things. And so there's a lot of good work now, both in terms of how the models are built, how they're used, but also how we take and personalize that data. And you can encapsulate that and really keep that private on a per user basis, but also try and figure out what that means if you want to share that data in some aggregated or collective way to improve a system. Let me give an example, and it's a little related to the wearable devices, the material science you're talking about. There are a number of companies that have advances in the material science for earbuds, such that they can actually now function as EEGs, which is to say, look at the electricity and electrical patterns in your brain. And you can tell all kinds of things about like attention or health or relaxation in those systems. And pardon me. On the one hand, this is really exciting on an individual basis because it helps to understand the state of somebody, and you can do everything from whether they are in flow and so they're really able to do the things that they're focused on. But if they're breaking out of that flow and if that is problematic in some way, if there's something environmental that has happened around them. And so that material science enables, and I promise you, you will start to see earbuds in the next year or two that do this, have let you read your EEGs, that open up lots of possibilities. And that does sound a little scary, right? That is something that kind of knows a little bit about what you're thinking. Doesn't feel good. And so the set of work around that then is how do we take that personal information, encapsulate it, and code it in ways such that it really is only for the context and personalization of that individual user. There's another ethical issue around there, which is also you can imagine that aggregating that, let's take the many millions of people who might be wearing those earbuds, you could actually do some really beneficial things in terms of, for instance, identifying if someone is having a stroke or if they are starting to get dementia or any of these other things. And you would like to actually aggregate that data so that you can help people, so you can do early identification, benefit, all these other things. And this is actually where things like federated learning really come into play. There's a lot of good work on how we do privacy preserving for the individual systems that also can take data and in aggregate help build models that benefit everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good example. There's also earrings that monitor for women that monitor their hormone levels and temperature and things like that with similar ethical considerations. So I think that the earbud example is an excellent one, but we're going to see more and more of them as time goes on. So I think it's important that we all keep those ethical considerations in mind. So, what resources would you recommend to our listeners who want to learn more about Inflection AI or augmented reality or any of the other topics that you've covered today?
Yeah, the first thing is download Pi. Ask Pi. Pi knows all sorts of things about this. You can also go to our website, inflection.ai, and learn more. And then I would encourage them to start learning. If they really want that deep academic bent, they can always go to Google Scholar. Or if they're looking for more sort of popular press, there are a lot of great outlets that are starting to focus on this as well. And of course, we will occasionally be posting on some of this ourselves as we start to grow, not just from today, but in the next 5 and 10 years into where AI can take us, making sure that as this moves so quickly, we remain a positive actor in the space.
Great. Okay, so as we wrap up, what would you like our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
I hope they think creatively about what AI can be, not just today, not just the chatbot, but how it really augments the human experience, and engage with us, engage with everybody who's working in the space, because it's not going to be just one company. It will be all of us working together and sharing those ideas and iterating through. I ask, think about how you would augment your own human experience.
Sean White, CEO of Inflection AI, thank you for talking with me today on AI Realized.
Thank you, Christina.